Welcome to At the Vines, the podcast that brings you inside the world of the vines, a global community of adventurers, storytellers, wine lovers, and winemakers. Through unforgettable experiences in the world's most iconic wine regions, our members connect with place, culture, and each other in ways that are both personal and profound. Each episode will introduce you to fascinating people, our members, our team, winemakers, and friends we met along the way, and explore what inspires them to travel boldly, live fully, and craft wines that reflect their own unique stories. This week on At the Vines, I sit down with Jordan Copland, a longtime friend, wine collector, and my winemaking partner here at the Vines. We talk about Jordan's journey into wine, starting with French Bordeaux in Europe, and how it grew into a lifelong passion rooted not just in taste, but in culture, history, and shared experiences. We also dive into our own partnership in winemaking, what makes a great wine team, and why personal connection matters more than scores or labels. Please enjoy this conversation with Jordan. Welcome, Jordan. How long has it been? It's been more than 15 years.
15 years that we met.
When was your first time in Mendoza?
2006.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
18 years.
That's fantastic. So
it did take considerably long to get here.
That's for sure. And if I recall correctly, there were no roads. We had to get on a horse just to even see the property.
That's correct. That's correct.
Let's go back a little bit. I know you're into wine and have been for a while, but what was your first memorable experience with wine, and how did it kind of get you started?
I remember it clearly. I was living in Europe. Obviously, like most people, young people, you get wine and you drink wine with friends or a family member, or somebody just says, here, try this. It's another thing entirely when you're in France and one of your co-workers is a French oenophile and starts introducing you to 1982 vintage Bordeaux's.
Good place to start.
Yeah, and starts with first growths and says, here, you should try this. You're going to like it. It's a little bit downhill from there unless you're unless you print money. But my first experience is where I understood kind of what the passion for wine was all about, was drinking French wine, really good French wine in France with French folks who were not only passionate about the wine, but also just the history and the culture around it. So that was most definitely my introduction. I then moved back to the States. I was living in California and took a liking to Napa Cabernets and Clarets. And so it started with French red and moved to those big, bold California reds, which I certainly like a lot less now than I did when I was younger. My palate isn't quite as immature, but they're good wines. They're just a little different than I would love to enjoy today.
It sounds like one of the things that got you started was making the difference between, it is a drink, it is something that's enjoyable to physically drink, but the stories behind it, the people behind it, the culture behind it, was that motivational? I know it is now for you, but did it start out there, or how did that develop?
Absolutely. I remember Pierre when he was walking me through the first growths, from a prominent French family. There was so much pride in the wine for its history, for its place in French culture. And look, truth be told, between beer and Jack Daniels, that was my exposure to alcohol. And when somebody shares something with you that not only is pleasing, but also there's something to talk about around it. And what you were talking about was meaningful. I remember being educated on what happened to all the fine wine houses during World War II, the explanations of how, they had false walls and they had wine stored in places where, at the time, the Germans who had occupied France couldn't get to. And it was just, to me, absolutely fascinating. There was just so much to take on, to understand. And it piqued my interest in learning more about not just the drink, but the place.
Yeah, and the history and the people around it. It's interesting you use the word pride, and I certainly experienced that in Argentina and also around in Europe. But there's this odd thing when pride kind of goes into ego, mostly in California. But any thoughts about that? It's interesting because, the pride in France or in Spain or in Mendoza, it's very different than I think I would describe the pride of somebody in Napa? Not all of them, obviously. I don't want to paint them all with a broad brush, but maybe it's just like the more commercial nature of it or something.
In my experience, I think it's more the underdog quality of American winemakers. And I think that we're always painted with short strokes by other places around the world. Fine Italian wine, fine French wine. And there's just a little bit of a stigma around American-produced wine, notwithstanding the fact that when you drank them side by side and the experts actually did tasting of some of the finest California wine.
The 71 famous tasting.
Right. That it became pretty obvious that it was not, what they were drinking was of equal quality. But I think it's the history and the newness of the New World winemaking that I think they're having to prove themselves. Sometimes, it's like the peacock having to spread its wings and show off, if you will. I think a little bit of American wine culture grew up from that underdog status. And so, maybe the way you get people to appreciate you more is you just scream a little bit louder and you make a little bit more noise. But I think largely a lot of that has kind of faded away. I think that the world has gotten more exposure to wines from every part of the world. I mean, certainly with the advent of the internet and being able to talk about something instantaneously, there are no secrets anymore. It's not like there's wine that's made in this little village and in Spain that the Spanish know, Vega Sicilia, and only the people that know fine wines would ever have heard of a special vineyard like that. Today, the information that's available to people is so much more widespread that the hunting around the world for the treasures of wines, it's very different. It's much more well known. And, credit to, the Robert Parkers and the Wine Spectators of the world for getting that message out and sharing with us not only the wine, but the place, the culture, the families. I mean, they celebrate the people, they celebrate the wine culture, the travel. All those things are something that's, in the last 20 or 25 years have become so much more important to people that are, on their journey of exploring wines. I mean, I wish that I had, the type of information that exists today, 30 plus years ago when I started, collecting wine. There's just so much that was trial and error versus, today you can go online to Cellar Tracker, and these are individuals who have their entire cellars posted there. There's tens of millions of bottles and tens of millions of reviews by not professionals, but just people. And I think that has become something super important to people who are just getting into the early stages of trying things around the world. And I envy the opportunity they have. They can get there a lot faster. I drank a lot of bad wines to figure out what I liked.
I think we all have. And I also think that one of the things that's changed in the last couple decades is this idea of, before, kind of people were Burgundy people or Napa people. They were very focused, and there's still some of that, but for the most part, most of the people that at least we come in contact are really looking very broadly, and it's discovery. And they'll try a wine from the Canary Islands or from Hungary or from some little village that is not on the map, but you can really get this aspect of discovery. I think is really interesting. And harkening back to your comment about pride, I think is quite interesting about kind of being the underdog. And I think we see that today, where not Napa versus France and Italy, but Paso Robles versus Napa, or Sicily versus Montalcino or Piedmont. I think those are kind of some interesting thing to see how that is coming up. And you get a lot of pride, and pride in a good way, I think is really leading to some just magical wines around the world.
I think that's so true. There are boutique winemakers in the appellations that are close to the big names, and there's a tremendous demand for those unique producers that are just trying things that are different. If you're in Napa and you're spending $1 million plus for an acre of land, you're not planting Primitivo. You're not planting, any varietal that largely is in Cabernet or Merlot or
Sure.
maybe,
Sonoma, right?
right. And because of that, there are opportunities for great wine growing areas that aren't Napa, that aren't Bordeaux, to try things. And I think some of the Super Tuscan's a perfect example where, you had great winemaking culture and people decided, you know what, I'm going to try something different in an area that's not known for this particular varietal. And if I choose to not follow the rules and not have to have the quote unquote licensing and good housekeeping seal of approval, my DOGC certification, let me see what I can make from that. And it's, I think the Italians got it right. I think there's a ton of that going on in, you mentioned Paso Robles as another great example. There's lots of spots around California. I don't think that people took Pinot Noir seriously in California. And we have many areas that aren't Napa or Sonoma that you can get wonderful California Pinot.
And you could save a lot of money.
And you can save a ton of money. That's right.
What opinion of wine might you hold that other people may disagree with? I know you've got strong opinions about a lot of things. Anything about wine that you think people might say, no, you're off to a rocker, or that they're not quite getting?
I think the best critic for wine is somebody that knows little about wine, but can just look you in the eye and say, I like this, or I don't like this. You want to listen to that person as much as you want to listen to the wine expert. The wine expert can help you get a better understanding of the chemistry around what you have, about the sensations that you're having, which is great. But there's poetry, there's novels, there's short stories. The wine expert is going to give you the novel version. But just talking to your friends, talking to your family, and just asking them, do you like this? Get that reaction from people, because I think wine is about its accessibility, not its quality. Quality is just one element. There are plenty of people that love wine, but wouldn't be able to enjoy or appreciate the difference between something that a winemaker had to spend $100 to get into a bottle that you'd pay $300 or $400 for, versus somebody who spends $10 to deliver a bottle that might cost $30 or $40. The person that you're sharing that with may be very, very happy with that $30 bottle of wine. What do you like about it? And I think that all of us benefit a great deal when we introduce people to the type of wines that they like. And then as the critic / novelist, you can say to yourself, you know what? They like this wine. It's a little bit less expensive, a little bit less complex. What can I share with them that is going to give them the same sensation that they're enjoying, that maybe is a class of finer wine than they think that they can tell the difference? And not surprisingly, if you do it right, you can deliver to them fine wine and they go, oh no, I really do like this and I can taste the difference. That's when you have a breakthrough. And to me, the wine critic is the person that struggles to tell you the subtleties and the nuances, but they can tell you what they like and what they don't like. And I think together you can help them go on a journey to get them more exposed to the fun part of wine, which is, I can get this wine in this region that tastes like this, and I can get that wine in that region that tastes very, very similar, even though they're grown 5,000 miles apart. And that to me is a fun part of wine. I just think about my family. I think about my parents. I think about my sister. They are very simple-minded in their approach to wine. But because of that, I've been able to say to them, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And I think I've been able to help them broaden their aperture. And to me, they're the wine critic because they know what they like. And they don't have to be able to explain it. They don't have to be able to tell me what, 6 primary or secondary notes that are tasting. They just know what they like.
Those trips where you just kind of feel like you're watching from the sidelines? That's not what we do at the Vines. With us, you're out in the vineyard, harvesting grapes, blending your own wine with amazing winemakers, and sitting down to these long, unforgettable dinners with people who feel like old friends. If that sounds like your kind of adventure, check us out on Instagram @TheVinesWinemakers.
Love that. And I think that's true not only for quote, novice wine drinkers or occasional wine drinkers. But one of the coolest things is once you get to know a friend's palate, you find something from some random place in Portugal or some other place in South America, Bolivia. Like, you know what? Jordan would love this wine. And sharing that with somebody, I think, is really powerful as well. The other thing about the critics that one of the things that I think has changed is that Robert Parker, if you liked, back in the day, if you liked that style wine, if Robert Parker gave it a good point, a good score, you were likely to really like it. I find now that most of the big critics, they're rating everything. And so they give it a rating, but it doesn't really help me figure out the style that I'm looking for. And I get a lot more wine discovery from my friends, from Mariana, from Heather, from our team, because they know my palate, from you, because we share a similar palate in a lot of ways. And those are the personal recommendations I think are becoming more powerful. And as you say, even when looking at Cellar Track or Vivina or the other places, you can identify some people. You go, hey, you know what? This guy loves Ornellaia and Terroir Limit, so I'm probably going to have a similar palate. I think that's pretty interesting.
Yep. Mention something, Michael. I'd love to poke at it a little bit. We've been drinking wine together for close to 20 years. We make wine together. We share each year 3 or 4 barrels of wine, a couple different wine styles, and we know what we like, especially here in Argentina, because we started our Argentine wine discovery together. I think we've had wines from other regions long before and long after we were on this journey together. And in the process of doing that, we have learned which winemakers we enjoy a lot and which ones we prefer less. And when we started making wines together and blending wine together, we found that if we were going to make them separately, we would come together and our wines would be very, very similar. And when we did blend together, we often agreed on the mixtures, but maybe they were ever so slightly different. We blended wine yesterday. And I say we, I mean me and Mariana. You and I didn't blend wine together. Why? Because for the last 4 years, I've been blending the wine, and it's exactly the way you would have blended it if I wasn't in the room, it's a crazy construct, but it's something that I think that people that are starting this journey and exploring, it's wonderful to find people that like what you like. And you mentioned Mariana. It's very important, I think, to point out that I've had the pleasure of sharing wines that I like with Mariana when she's in the U.S. So I'll grab some different wines from my cellar. We're at a wine dinner. I'll share them with Mariana because she knows what I like, not only from the Argentine blends, but also from, my French wines or California wines or the Italian wines that I like and the styles within those wines and the years that I prefer. It's allowed her to help you and I make the wine in Argentina that really satisfies our collective palate. And I think that the wines we make together are very different than a lot of other folks would choose to make here. They just have certain characteristics. They're longer lived wines. They're bright. They're more of a claret style than a lot of people make here. They're bold, but they're not over the top in any way.
Strong acidity.
I mean, the word elegant as opposed to, overpowering. And it's something that we've, because we've drank wine together so much, we know what each other like and don't like. And, that has been something that for me, it's a great journey to have gone on and to do it with somebody else and know that I know that for a number of years you blended our GSM, for example, and I couldn't or wouldn't have wanted it to taste any different than it tastes. And sometimes I don't get to taste it until it shows up in my shipment and I open it with great anticipation and I pull the cork and it's like, wow, this is great. And so again, we've kind of gone full circle on this, but it's the idea that there's a journey involved, and it involves a lot of experiences. It involves a lot of communication. And sometimes it's the things that you don't have to say. We don't have to even talk about where it ends up. It's, Michael, I think you're going to like this, or as we had a recent experience, wow, this one's going to be challenging. Yeah, I'm not sure we're going to be able to figure this one out together. But, we always end up getting there.
That's part of the magic. I mean, if the wine was the same every year, it would be vodka or beer or something else like that. And I also do want to talk a little bit more about Mariana in terms of her role in this, because her knowing our shared palate and frankly the divergences, and so she kind of has to negotiate that. She kind of negotiates that on our behalf. But her ability to know the palates and taste of our 350 different owners, it's remarkable. It's something about, I mean, Mariana has it, Pablo has it, Santiago Chavo have it. There's something about winemakers and some wine drinkers, but especially winemakers, that just have this incredible memory. And we'll have an owner that's been here, one time, two times, and she can tell you exactly what kind of wines they like. And that is really just, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
And a little intimidating.
It's enviable, certainly. I think that she, for everyone that she tastes with, she has a few notes. It's not a lot. It's not a notebook full of descriptors. It's one or two things that she writes down that triggers for her the key characteristics that she's looking for. We had an exchange last night. We drank a wine together, and she said that, that's a very, very strong pepper note to it. And I said to her, green pepper. And she said, yes, it is green pepper. And I said to her, that one of my favorite wines is known for having that green pepper quality. You know that I've been buying and collecting it for many years. And she looked at me and she said, yes, but in the right quantity. And this one, I think, maybe is a little more than it should. And that to me was remarkable, because we got to the same place, but what she was really telling me was, this particular wine is in your wheelhouse, but it's not fully in your wheelhouse, because if you could taste it more and you had the benefit of having drank it for the last 45 minutes, as I had, you would find that one characteristic that you thought you liked would actually grate on you a little bit if you had a little more of it. And it really was remarkable, because we were talking about something. She knew exactly where I was going with that. She knew exactly which wine I was talking about, and that's the benefit of having worked with her for probably 15 years.
Yeah, and drinking a lot of wine. And I think about Mariana and Pablo and the team. Since we've been making wine here in 2010, we have probably made 5,000 different wines. Pablo has blended 5,000 different wines over the last 13 or 14 years. Other than maybe somebody like Michel Rolland, I don't think there's anybody in the world that blends that much, which is experience. It's reps. It's like it's the 10,000 hours, whatever it is. And I think that's one reason why they're able to react to our owner's palate so easily. Mariana has blended Malbec and Cabernet Franc hundreds of times and knows the grapes and knows how they work together.
100%. And I think what's remarkable, I can't say this as a statement of fact, but it's certainly, I think it's hard to disprove. I don't think there's a larger custom crush operation in the planet than what's going on at the Vines of Mendoza. If anybody's making 500 different wines in the same exact building for 500 different people every year, I'm not aware.
Yeah, me.
So if they exist, great. They're
more power to them.
Exactly. Let's talk a little bit about that unbelievable skill. So we had a wine tasting a few days ago, and I think we drank a dozen wines. Many were from our vines portfolio, and many of them were from the finest producers in South America, and not only the Uco Valley, it was all over Argentina. And when we tasted all of those amazing wines, the wine that I liked the best, and many of the folks in the group liked the best out of the dozen or so that we drank, turned out to be one of Pablo Montreal's wines. It was his Cabernet Franc, which, Michael, you and I blend both Malbec and Cabernet Franc. But when the wine is right, when the year is right, the Cabernet Franc Malbec blend is really just something super special. And I think the highest rated Argentine wines, more often than not, turn out to be the Cabernet Franc-led wines as opposed to the Malbec.
And from the Uco Valley. I share that because this is a wine that Pablo has the benefit of all of the different wines that he gets to taste and blend on behalf of others. And he has his own palate, and he has his own approach to winemaking. And when he gets to express himself for what he likes, it's remarkable how what he likes turns out, compared to many of these other wines, turns out to be one that you would arguably say is, if not the best of the group, is certainly amongst the best of the group.
I don't think there's any better testament to how great your winemaking team is when you taste wines from all over the place, and the wine that you like the best is the one that your winemaker takes for himself, trying to deliver what he likes the most, which I just think is amazing.
Yeah, no, he's incredible. I still don't know how he keeps track of the 500 wines we make every year. Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a little step back. So as we referenced, we've been together as friends, as business partners, as winemakers, wine drinkers for almost 20 years now. Take us back to how this all started. We were introduced by a mutual friend, our buddy John Steinberg, and the rest has been history. Tell us how this kind of journey has gone.
I love to tell the story. So we're introduced to one another through, again, a mutual friend. I had worked in the e-commerce business for a number of years, and I'd also worked in the wine shipment business, the e-commerce direct-to-consumer wine business. I was a board member of a wine shipment company that Vines was considering using at the time. And Michael and I got to talking about this vision that they had for their project, and I fell in love with the idea. I certainly understood the challenges of the startup and how much of a huge undertaking this would become.
You know how people always say, this wine reminds me of a place? Well, what if it actually was from that place? With the Vines, you don't just drink the wine, you help make it. We travel to incredible regions, work with amazing winemakers, and yes, you can even blend your own barrel. It's hands-on, a little messy, and a lot of fun. Follow us on Instagram @The Vines Winemakers and come and see what we're bottling next.
We didn't quite realize the additional challenges of Argentina at the time.
It's not even a clue as to how that was going to come together. But so long story short, we met a number of times, and we had arranged for a small group of us to come down here to Mendoza and to physically touch the project. At the time we came down, there was nothing here. It took multiple hours to get here because the roads were unpaved, sometimes single lane road with a truck in front of you going 40 kilometers an hour for 6 kilometers. Eventually we get here. As Michael mentioned, we had to get on a horse and ride through, you just couldn't walk through all of it with the stones. It was literally in the middle of the desert. And my initial reaction, having, shortly prior to this trip, had written a check to participate in the venture, I'm thinking to myself, this is what they called that Florida land deal back in the 60s and 70s. Somebody just sold me swampland. But kidding aside, I just remember we were walking the project and Michael said to us, this is where the vineyard's going to be. And if you look over there, that's where eventually we'll have our resort, and we're going to have, wine planted everywhere. And you really had to have vision and faith to, at that moment, see what the art of the possible. And, you roll the clock forward to where we are today. It's been a tremendous journey, and good, bad, and everything in between. But the first reaction that you get when you walk through the door of the resort and you see through the 20-foot high glass window in front of you, you see the Andes. I've been down here 20 times, and it takes your breath away every time. It never gets old. I'm down here with my wife this week, and you can just see she's still taking pictures, the same pictures she's taken 10 different times, because it's just, you just want to share with other people them just how magical it is. I alluded a little bit to challenges in the journey. The Argentine culture is, on the one hand, what makes it so special. On the other hand, it's exactly what makes it as challenging. It's a very difficult environment to do business. There's huge amounts of trust in the way people work together. Yes, there are contracts, but that's not what matters. It's the handshake. But at the same time, you're trying to do business as a Western business person. You're trying to stick to budgets. You're trying to stick to timelines. You're trying to be operationally efficient. While at the same time, the culture kind of flies in the face of that. And, Michael, to your tremendous credit, and I tell you this all the time, the ability to effectively navigate both worlds, to be Western business person with an understanding of a bottom line focus, but also delivering an unbelievable experience, while at the same time not eliminating or diluting the wonderment of the Argentine culture, the friendliness, the passion, just the family feel that you get. I mean, you meet people for the first time in Argentina and you feel closer to them than sometimes you do your own family members within a couple of hours. It is very, very unique in my world travels. And it's something that I just can't get enough of it. And, I feel very lucky that I'm sitting here, and I'm envious of you sitting here in your home in Mendoza in the project, and know that you get to live and experience this every day. It's really quite something.
Well, a few more years, we'll get you retired and get you a house down here. So we have a lot of new vineyard owners. What advice would you give to someone just starting their journey with the vines?
I think that you need to love Argentine wine. I would not, if they're not a wine lover and you don't love the types of wines that we make here, the benefit that you'll get, okay, maybe you should come here and buy one of our villas and treat this as a vacation, home, as opposed to winemaking. But I think for most people who will be listening to this, your approach is, yes, I like Argentine wine. I love the idea of being able to make wine, put my own label on it, be in the wine production universe in a way that's economically, reasonable, and to have the passion that goes with creating something that you have for yourself, for your family, for your children, for your friends. My suggestion would be try to figure out what scale you want to be on, because a lot of people look at this and they see a commercial opportunity for them, or they're in the restaurant business, or they're already in the beverage business and they see an opportunity to commercialize this. I think that's fantastic. Figure out the scale that you need. Do you need 10 acres? Do you need 15 acres? Do you need 8? Figure that out. Buy what you need in terms of production. Make sure that you get enough, but, don't overestimate needs, because, you can always buy more later. For folks that have more modest expectations, you need to make sure that you have enough so that you can use multiple varietals. I can get whatever varietal I want here. I can get, the GSM.
Just trade some of your Malbec for something.
That's right. You can do that. But I would also tell you that when I first planted, there was a miscommunication, and I ended up with an acre of Cabernet Sauvignon as well as two acres of Malbec, which I wanted. I really wanted Cabernet Franc. And as it turned out, we over time ended up swapping out the Cabernet Sauvignon for Cabernet Franc. I think it was about 18 months later. The take rates were good, but we were in a position where it's like, okay, I can spend a little money, we can fix this. So I ended up with exactly what I wanted. What I would tell you is, as you think about what you want to put in the bottle, think about, you're going to feel better about it if the grape comes from your planted acreage. So don't buy more than you need, but also don't get less than you need. And so spend time with Mariana, spend time with, the wineries down here, try different things, try to figure out exactly what it is that gets you passionate about making your own wine, and then, make an investment in vineyards so that you have the varietals that you're most likely to use. And of my production, 80 to 90% of what I make and bottle is from my property. And then I purchase a little bit of a few other things that I make less of. So for me, it's perfect. And, I'm at 3 acres and I have exactly the right amount for my needs. If I wanted to increase my production, I have a little bit of capacity there, but, I certainly could see wanting to do a little more and getting as much as 4, even 5 acres. But where for me, it's the perfect amount. And I think that that's just very important as you consider this. It's not expensive compared to doing this in almost any other wine region in the world. So it's not like you made a mistake and you spent an extra $1 million on an acre of Napa Cab. The cost here again is relative to other options is pretty reasonable.
You make a fair amount of wine, somewhere between 600, 900, maybe 1,200 bottles a year.
Yeah.
What do you do with all of it? Because that's one of the fears is people like, what the hell am I going to do with all of this wine?
Well, let's start with what my wine mission is. My wife and I are very big animal activists. We spend a lot of our charitable time and money on animal rights causes. Our label is called Rescue. The lion's share of what we produce, we give away to friends, to institutions, to places that in turn use those giveaways to create donation opportunities for various animal rescues in and around where we live. So costs that I incur to produce the wine, I view as, what I want to spend in terms of my charitable giving. It's not a deductible charitable giving, but it's something that I do independent of that. And, for me, I probably will give away 500, 600 bottles a year. And I can't even begin to imagine how much money we've raised through that. And quite frankly, when people like it, they come back and say, do you have more of the wine? And my response to them is, did you donate? And if they say yes, I find a way to get them some more wine. So it's a way that my wife and I can do something that marries a passion that we have for animals and at the same time, so a passion that I have and we have together for making fine wine here in Argentina.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, that was one of the inspirations for us creating the rescue shelter that we have here at the Vines and the Spay and Neuter Clinic. And you and Michelle have been big supporters of that, which we appreciate very much. We just crossed the 1,000 mark for spay and neuter here in the Uco Valley. And I think we'll have 200 dogs adopted in 2024. So we're excited about that journey together. It's
fantastic.
And it's always fun to just go to the shelter and see the pups. Well, if you could host a dinner for 4 guests, living or dead, no family, what would they be? And what wine are you gonna serve, or wines? I'll give you a couple. Are you gonna serve to facilitate this magical conversation?
It's always a good one. I would probably ask Albert Einstein to sit to my left. I might ask Churchill or some other figure of the 20th century with knowledge of what it was like to live in one of the most challenging times of humankind to sit to my right. And I don't know, maybe Picasso or Dali, somebody artistic to sit in front. I would serve, well, if I could get some fine Burgundy, I would go there, but that's off the table for most mere mortals. I would definitely be drinking Bordeaux, Claret, and I would finish with, as I love,
I know it. I hear it coming.
the Chateau de Cam as our dessert wine. It's one of the few magical things that exist on this earth. But for me, it would probably be Bordeaux, not because it's necessarily "quote unquote" my favorite wine. I have so many favorites, but there's just so much more. When you choose a Bordeaux, you have a very, very wide aperture of different wine styles and flavor profiles that you can go to. And there's a reason why, fine French wine is what it is. I mean, it's a lot to do with the fact that even though it's a similar set of grapes and blended in different proportions, that has wildly different flavor profiles. So that would be my choice.
That's great. Well, the last question we like to ask is there a wine, could be a specific wine, could be a region, could be a producer that you would suggest that maybe is not so well known that people check out?
I would tell you one that probably is a little well known, and it's because it's a little bit of a PSA for California. I'm a huge fan of Ridge. I like Ridge for the reason that my wine journey for me has been so much fun. Ridge is a California wine. It's made in a Napa style, but it is not made in Napa. It is a Claret style wine that has many of the aging and full body characteristics of a Bordeaux. And all the while, it's a wine that the owners of that vineyard are so super protective of the history and the authenticity of what they're doing. They're not trying to be anything but who they are. I'm sure there are hundreds of similar wineries all over the world. I just happen to know that one, and I fell in love with that wine, drinking 20-plus-year-old aged Ridge almost by accident with a friend whose father had some in his cellar and had just been sitting there forever. And we pulled corks on some super old ones, and they tasted just as fresh as a young wine from California. And there's just very little in that area or in all of California that really is similar to that. It's like the it's a little bit of a find, but yet on the other hand, it's also a big winery that has many, many different types of wines. But the Ridge Montebello is what I was more referring to, just has a uniqueness to it that I would tell people, go find your Ridge. That was the one that I discovered. And again, not, certainly not a small producer, but the things that I got out of the journey of learning about that wine took me to so many other places around the world. And I look forward to having other folks, go on that journey and finding their equivalent.
That's a great suggestion. Love it. Well, Jordan, thank you very much for this time. More importantly, for your nearly 2 decades of friendship. I look forward to the next decades of good times and good wines. Appreciate it.